My town is known to get snowed in from time to time. I work from home, so I really didn't have to worry much about it. If the house was stocked, I just had to hunker down until they plowed the snow down. Most of the time, it was the streets that got snowed in, but this year the snow almost came up to my windows. My house was pretty small, a one-story squat house, but it was enough for me. The way the snow was coming down was the first time I ever considered the possibility I could get snowed into my own home. I shoveled as much as I could on my own, but it was coming down faster than I could get it cleared out, so I gave up and went in. Evening came, and wanting something quick, I made soup and a sandwich. By this point, the snow had gotten really bad. I was getting worried, and attempted to go out and shovel more, but it seemed to be coming down even faster. I sent my mother a text, telling her that I might actually get snowed in, and that if she didn't hear from me in 2 days, to call the police. A scary text to receive, but an even scary one to send. I lived alone, and not many people lived on my street. It always took the snow trucks a day or two to get out. Though I was worried, there wasn't much I could do. I scrolled on my phone, making sure it was plugged in, but I didn't have a good signal, so I eventually fell asleep. I woke up shivering. The power had gone out, and I could hear the faint wind and snowfall outside. I tried looking out my window, but it was covered in ice. I got up, stumbling around the room for a flashlight and throwing clothes on in the process. It was freezing. I threw a bunch of blankets on my bed and burrowed underneath. It helped a little bit, but I had already gotten too chilly. Shaking, I tried getting back to sleep. Not a minute or two passed before I heard shuffling outside my window. It was faint at first and got louder, like someone walked directly up to my house. I heard what sounded like a man's voice, but it was really muffled. I squeezed myself into a ball. I didn't know who it was, but I felt kind of relieved that the snow had gotten so high. I kept the shotgun under my bed, but didn't move to get it. Besides the voice minutes ago, I had heard nothing else. I had my head buried in the covers, but I pulled it out slowly so I could hear clearly. A few minutes passed, and this bright light filled my room. I squinted and saw a shadow of a head come across my window, and then this weird movement. It looked at first as if someone was flicking snow into the air, until I noticed the light was getting dimmer and dimmer. They were blocking my window with snow. I started to scream, not really knowing what to do, but the person didn't stop. All I could do was watch in horror as the light showed up in each window, each time getting dimmer as the snow was thrown on top of it. After the last window, I heard whoever it was walk away, and then silence. The snow was already so high, I was certain that half of my house was now fully covered in it. I was trying not to panic. My mother had responded to my text, but I didn't have enough service to give her an update about what had just happened. All I could do was wait it out. It was 2 a.m. around this time, and I had no choice but to head back to sleep. I piled even more covers on, and by that time I didn't know how many layers of clothes I had on. Morning came, and I heard yelling outside. I shot up, running to my front door. I heard footsteps from all directions and someone calling at the house, asking if anyone was home. I screamed that I was alive and that somebody covered my windows in snow. When the snow was cleared enough from my door, I was able to get out, practically falling into the arms of the first person I saw. I didn't realize how terrifying that was for me, and finally felt like I could breathe, until I saw the outside of my house. There were a couple of men from the city. I talked with one of them, telling the story of the night before. He listened in disbelief, one telling me that whoever did this either knew I was still in the house or was hoping I wouldn't have made it out. I don't know why my house was chosen for whatever this was. I don't even know if it's considered a crime. But I moved out of there a couple months later to somewhere warmer. I hate the snow. I've always hated the winter season too. Everything's cold and dreary, and I especially hate the storms that come with it. The way the snow falls, especially at night, always gives me this eerie, creepy feeling. I was around 23 years old, around the time of this story. My grandmother needed help caring for my grandfather, and since I lived close by, I would come over and help out a lot. Once he was asleep, my grandmother and I sat on the couch, which was directly outside his room, covered in a blanket. We sipped tea and talked about the storm, which looked like it was slowly turning into a blizzard. I was slightly worried, but figured we were fine for the most part. We had everything, enough oil for the generator, and there weren't any trees surrounding the house. The most we had to worry about was the wind. Around 12, my grandma went to bed, asking me to check in on my grandpa before I tucked in for the night. I stayed out in the living room for a while longer, peeking outside from time to time to see how bad the storm was getting. The couch was just underneath the window, looking out to the street, so I got a clear view of everything. I got lost in my thoughts when I noticed something all at once. I had been daydreaming, staring at the lamppost in front of the house when I noticed it was slightly moving. I snapped out of it and moved closer to the window, trying to get a closer look. Whatever this was tall, stretching past the lamppost, moving in this weird, peculiar way. It suddenly got eerily quiet, and I could see it clearer now. Watching it, it slowly crouched down. The snow had almost stopped, and I was able to see it. It had these oddly shaped horns on its head, and was leaned down expecting something in the street. I got a glimpse of its full figure. It was long and lanky, and had the skin color of tree bark. I didn't know what to do, or how to react, but seeing it made my stomach turn. I got this horrible sense of dread, and without warning, it turned to stare directly at me, and my heart stopped. It locked eyes with me. They were an icy blue. It shifted its body slightly, and before I could react, my grandfather started screaming in his room, breaking the silence. I broke my gaze, running away from the living room into his room, almost tripping into his bed. I hadn't crossed his threshold before something went slamming into the living room window. My grandfather was still screaming, and my grandmother was now awake, trying to calm him. We were running around trying to find something to close the hole in the window, while trying to comfort my granddad. My grandfather had a decent-sized piece of drywall that we were able to cover it with. Me the entire time searching for whatever that thing was, terrified it was going to reappear. I believe if my grandfather hadn't yelled at that exact moment, I would have been hit by whatever was thrown at that house, which we later found out the next morning was a neighbor's mailbox. My mother lives by herself, and the older she gets, the more I worry about her. There was a storm scheduled to hit our area by that evening. My mother lived in a pretty nice neighborhood, but the plow trucks always took their sweet time getting out to the area. I decided to stay with her. She was excited to see me as she opened the door, giving me a big hug and ushering me in. The snow had been lightly falling all day, but an hour later it was coming down hard. Around 9 p.m. it stopped. My mother went to bed fairly early, leaving me up alone. Thankfully, the power didn't go out, but it was only so many videos I could watch, and I really wasn't a TV person. With nothing else to do, I figured the storm was over, so I headed outside to shovel, thankful for something to do. I shoveled for a while, stopping here and there for a cigarette break, enjoying the weather and how quiet it was. When I was done, I sat on the porch, pulling out another cig and lighting it, not wanting to go in. Everywhere I looked, it was covered with a fresh layer of snow. As I watched, something caught my peripheral. I noticed someone walking down the middle of the street. Curious, I squinted. My mom had a pretty deep lot, so it took me a while to realize what I was seeing. An eerie feeling washed over me. The street was lit up, street lamps lining the sidewalk, so this person was completely illuminated. They were completely naked. It looked to be an older woman, and she was dragging something behind her in what looked like a bloody pillowcase. Every few steps she stopped and began letting out this horrible wail. Her hair covered most of her face, so I couldn't make out her features. Not knowing what to do, I called the police. With temperatures dropping rapidly, I knew she'd likely freeze to death. When they answered, they claimed that since the streets were blocked, they wouldn't be able to get out to us. I called out to her, but she completely ignored me, picking up the pace and running away. When the snow cleared the next day, I called the police back, seeing if anyone else had seen the woman and if she had gotten to safety. But no one in the neighborhood or the police had been able to find her.